Keyonte George came out of high school as the 9th-ranked prospect and the 2nd-ranked shooting guard nationally behind only Cason Wallace. George committed to Baylor in August of 2021, and with his commitment became the highest-ranked prospect to commit to Baylor in the program's history. George's ability to handle the basketball to create his own shot, score in bunches, and play tough defense made him a coveted prospect during recruiting. Should those skills continue to shine through as they have early on with Baylor, George will likely be a lottery pick in the 2023 NBA draft and has a good chance of breaking into the top 10. One strength for George is his ability to create shots for himself. One of the toughest things for NBA teams to find is players that can consistently create good scoring opportunities for themselves. It's hard to find players that you can throw the ball to and ask them to create something out of nothing to bail out a possession or get a big bucket. George has the potential to be the type of player that can do this at a high level. George can handle the basketball at a high level and has the quickness and athleticism to create separation from his defenders. He has also shown the ability to score at all levels of the floor. He can finish acrobatic shots around the rim or step back and knock down a jumper. George has struggled a bit with efficiency thus far this season, but if he's able to improve in this area, his ability to create shots could be incredibly valuable to an NBA team. Another strength for George is defense. The first part of George's strength on the defensive end is how active he is. George is very energetic on the defensive end, running around and disrupting passing lanes with his quickness and length. One of the biggest parts of being a good defender is being willing to put in the effort, and George certainly does that. But beyond just the activity aspect, he has also shown the ability to be a technically sound defender on the perimeter. George is good at moving his feet to keep his body squared up on the offensive player, making it difficult for them to penetrate and get to the basket. Point of attack defense is incredibly valuable in the NBA. Once a player is able to penetrate into the paint from the perimeter, they have a variety of options in an increasingly spaced out NBA with more and more strong shooters. George looks like he could be a disruptive perimeter defender at the NBA level and be a valuable piece to an NBA defense. One weakness for George is shot selection. George seems to be very confident in his ability to score at any time regardless of circumstances. While this is a plus in that he isn't going to stop believing in himself if he misses a couple shots, it also leads to some questionable shot selection. There are times where George will fire up tough shots far too early in offensive possessions. George doesn't seem like a guy that's just looking to get his. He's actually shown some decent ability as a passer and seems legitimately excited to see his teammates doing well. I just think it's a case where he legitimately believes he can create a good shot for himself and ends up forcing the issue. As he matures at Baylor and in the NBA, coaches will need to help him slow down a bit and not force up tough shots before it is necessary. Another weakness for George is turnovers. Through 12 games this season, George is averaging 3.3 turnovers per game. This puts him dead last among 96 qualifiers in the Big 12. A silver lining for George is that he still has a positive assist-to-turnover ratio. He is currently averaging 3.9 assists per game. But the turnovers have been a consistent problem throughout the season. George now has had 4 or more turnovers in a game 5 times, including 6 turnovers in 2 separate games. George's turnover issues stem from 2 big issues. One being he is a bit overconfident in his ability to fit passes into small windows. This is kind of similar to George's issues with shot selection. There are times where he tries to squeeze a pass into a window that just isn't advisable. The other issue is George losing the ball driving into crowds. I'm not sure if this is an issue with ball security, bad luck, or just trying to take on more defenders than he's capable of. But George seems to lose the ball with some regularity when he tries to drive into a crowded area. But regardless of how George is turning the ball over, the point is he is doing it an awful lot. NBA teams will want to see George show some growth in this area as the season goes along. This first clip displays some of George's ability to create shots for himself. The play starts with George bringing the ball over half court. Gonzaga isn't fully set on defense, but there is a defender ready on the perimeter to take him on and another ready to slide over and help on the drive. George drives to the right, picks up his dribble to avoid getting it poked away, Euro steps around his defender, and finishes through contact at the basket. George is creative with the ball in his hands and has the ability to create shots for himself at a high level. This could be a very valuable skill at the NBA level. This next clip shows off George's ability on the defensive end of the floor. The play begins with George defending out near half court. The offensive player initially drives right, and George slides in front to force him back the other way. He then slides back the other way and forces the offensive player to change direction again. The offensive player then tries to spin into a shot, and George jumps up and just rips the ball away. George is a high-intensity player on the defensive end, but also looks to be very technically sound. He could be a high-level NBA defender down the road. This final clip gives us a look at how George can struggle with his shot selection at times. The play starts with George handling the ball at the top of the arc. His teammate tries to set a screen, but his defender easily gets over it. Meanwhile, the roll defender gets lost and ends up in no man's land. George has a teammate wide open in the corner just one pass away, but instead he puts up a contested 3 with 23 seconds left on the shot clock. George is very confident in his ability to make shots from anywhere at any time. He just needs to learn when to utilize that power and when to try a different option. Keyonte George was the highest ranked recruit in Baylor history for a reason. He can create his own shot as a wing, defend at a high level, and even chip in some playmaking as well. He's clearly very talented and has allowed that talent to shine through so far this season at Baylor. While there are some concerns with his shot selection and his turnover issues, overall George is an intriguing NBA talent and is likely to be a top 10 pick so long as this season continues the way it has thus far. I like George as a prospect, I just want him to show some more efficiency as a scorer before I say he's going to be a star. I think that he has a floor as a rotation player in the NBA at least, but his path to stardom will depend on if he's able to make more of those shots that he's able to create. My NBA comp for Keyonte George is Devin Booker. Now that Booker is a perennial all-star, this might seem like a bit of a reach. But early in his career, Booker scored a lot on okay efficiency and turned the ball over a lot as he went through some growing pains as a playmaker. George is going through a similar thing at Baylor right now, and we could see the same thing early in his career. Best case scenario is he learns the lessons he needs to like Booker did and blossoms into a star.
What's up, guys? So it's funny we're doing Keyonte George this episode because earlier this week I sent out a somewhat controversial tweet suggesting that Keyonte George doesn't have the best vertical athleticism. Some people said that particular play wasn't the best example of it, which I agree is fair. So here's a few more examples of what I mean.
By George. Oh, by Langston Love starts to break the other way. Keyonte George has it swatted out of bounds. The rebound by Lohner up the floor to George. Oh, and he missed the dunk, and he got his own miss.
So hopefully you see what I mean. If not, we can probably still agree that his leaping ability isn't where he'll be buttering his bread at the NBA level. Now let's get to the NBA comps. As you saw earlier, my channel partner Jacob comped him to Devin Booker. Normally he and I are pretty close on our opinions of prospects, but it turns out we're pretty far apart with Keyonte George. Perhaps I'm just letting myself be too influenced by the poor efficiency we've seen so far from George, but I just don't think George is on Booker's level as a shooter. Booker had shooting splits of 47, 41, and 83 in his one season at Kentucky. I believe in George's shot-making ability, but not to Booker's elite level. So without further ado, my NBA comp for Keyonte George is Gary Harris. Like Harris, I think George will settle into a lengthy career as a useful 3-and-D role player. He probably won't ever be a top 3 option for a good team, but he'll average between 10 and 15 points per game during his prime and be in playoff teams' rotations.